Kevin Matthews is an assistant professor at George Mason University, that's here in the Washington area. He has also worked as a reporter on British and Irish politics. Kevin, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, your reaction to this vote. Was this expected? Certainly a very tight one at that.
It was expected by today, but it wasn't expected when Johnson got his deal through on Thursday. He assured the other EU leaders that he had the votes for this deal. So this is a huge setback for him. And as Jeremy Corbyn said, a humiliation. What it shows is a deep distrust in Parliament, not just of Boris Johnson, but MPs have a deep distrust of each other. That's why Oliver Letwin put forward this amendment, because they want to make sure that Johnson doesn't get his vote and the hardcore Brexiters can then turn around and stymie the votes or delay the votes to implement a deal and crash out with a no deal on the 31st of October. They had no choice other than to offer this amendment, but it is a huge setback for Johnson, yeah.
By law, Boris Johnson has to request an extension from the EU, but he has said, quote, "I will not negotiate a delay with the EU, and neither does the law compel me to do so." What do you make of that? How do you see this process moving forward from that?
It looks like they're going to go straight back to the courts on Monday. If he doesn't send that letter by tonight, they'll have no other choice than to go back to the courts and have the courts order Johnson to send the letter. He doesn't want to send that letter because he's afraid of how it's going to look for the next general election. He's got Nigel Farage and the hardcore Brexiters outside the party snapping at his heels, and what he was hoping for was a deal by the 31st of October to call a general election to say he had been the prime minister who brought Brexit off and ride off in triumph, and that looks increasingly unlikely if he doesn't get the deal through by the...
Span this beyond the UK, for example, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce weighed in and urged Johnson to request an extension. What's at stake here when it comes to the world economy and trade?
Well, it just increases the uncertainty for the last 3 years. And though Johnson says that he wants to get Brexit done, well, even if you get over this withdrawal agreement and get that through somehow, that's not the end. That's just the beginning of this process, because then Britain and the EU have to negotiate trade arrangements. At the same time, you've got domestic problems in Britain with Scotland probably wanting to hold another independence referendum, and the just witch's brew of problems in Ireland. For Americans and for other countries, as I say, it just leaves everything up here.
And that certainly, I think, leads to not but in world, wouldn't you say?
Oh, it does. But the only way that we're going to get beyond Brexit fatigue is if the British people have a second vote and they decide this was a bad idea all along. They've wasted 3 years on this one process. They've not been able to address all sorts of problems, and they're also leaving at a time when the world is facing a huge range of crises, notably climate change, where you need countries to come together. So this idea that Britain can go off on its own and be this free trading, buccaneering nation, I think is a fantasy.
Well, 3 years is a long time. It's hard to believe it's come so far. Kevin Matthews, assistant professor at George Mason University, thanks so much for your insight and for coming in today.
Thank you very much.